Happy Wednesday, everyone. My name is James Lee. Welcome to 5149, where I talk about business and politics from an independent perspective. A quick PSA before we get going. If you end up enjoying this video, please give it a quick like and share with a friend. Also, subscribe to 5149 if you haven't already done so, and support independent media. All right, today the topic is third parties. I'm going to discuss the obvious case of why we need a third party, or even a fourth one for that matter, but how it can actually work in the United States. To me, there's one clear reason why we need a third party in the United States. That reason: policies passed into law in the US do not represent public opinion. This is something that I've cited in a previous video, but the sad fact is that the preferences of the average American appear only to have a minuscule, near zero, statistically non-significant impact upon public policy. This means that we have essentially an unrepresentative government. That is a major problem, but also a huge electoral opportunity. Now, the problem with third-party conversations in America is that it usually centers around presidential elections. Not only that, we really only talk about third parties as a reaction to either the Democrats or Republicans rigging the primary process and then forcing a crappy candidate down our throats during the primary. And by then, due to the lack of organization or some outdated election laws, it's oftentimes too late for these third parties to even get on the ballot in many states. For example, in Texas, the filing deadline, the date which a candidate must declare that they are running for a particular office, is December of the preceding year. The laws also make it harder for a third party to get on the ballot. For example, Arizona requires only 6,000 signatures to appear on the ballot if the candidate is running as a Democrat or a Republican, but 37,000 if running as an independent. I know, it's complete BS, but it's what happens when election laws are written by the parties in power. So I'm not going to sit here and deny that at the presidential level, it's very unrealistic for any third party to make significant headway versus the two major parties. But we also have to remember that the laws are not written by the president. The responsibility of drafting and passing legislation falls to Congress. So in terms of national politics, the presidential election is not the only place a third party can make a big impact. To explain what I mean here, we need to talk a little bit about Canada. So let's go on a trip north of the border and take a quick peek at Canadian politics. Although Canada uses a parliamentary system, the election rules are actually not that much different from what we have here in the United States. The major difference is that the leader of the country, the prime minister, is selected by elected party officials and not directly voted on by the public. But come to think of it, do we really choose who our party leader is? Anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole today. We're talking about third parties. So if we look at how they elect members of their legislature, the rules are actually not that different from how we elect members of the House of Representatives. Canada is divided into 338 electoral districts. Colloquially, they're called ridings, and the winner is selected by a first-past-the-post system. Basically, the candidate with the most votes in a riding will win that seat and represent that riding in the national legislature. Pretty much the same as we have here in the United States. You win the most votes in your district, you're in. Now let's dive into the numbers a little bit. There are 338 total ridings in Canada, so that means that a party would need to win 170 ridings to win a majority of the seats. Same concept here in the United States. We have 435 seats in the House, so 218 is required to pass any legislation. That means in order to make an impact on legislation, a third party doesn't need to win a majority or anywhere close to that. It just needs to win enough to make it so that no other party has a majority. And any seat a third party picks up makes it just that much harder for one of the big parties to get to that magic number of 50% plus one. Easier said than done, of course, but let's jump back into what's going on in Canada. Right now, there are two major parties in Canada, the Liberal Party and the Conservative Party. In addition to those two parties, you have two smaller but not insignificant minority parties, the Bloc Québécois and the New Democratic Party. The Bloc Québécois is a regionally based party devoted to Quebec nationalism and the promotion of Quebec's sovereignty. The New Democratic Party, or the NDP, is a far-left social democratic party that advocates for issues like LGBTQ rights, international peace, and environmental stewardship. So if we look at the election results from the past several decades, none of the two minority parties have won more than 20% of the seats, except for this huge NDP surge in 2011 when they completely decimated the Liberal Party and won 33% of the seats. But what they have been able to do, though, is stop the big parties from winning an outright majority. In 4 of the 7 elections held since the year 2000, the governing party of Canada has held fewer than 50% of the seats in Parliament, which would mean that they would need to work with another party to pass legislation. This includes the current government in Canada led by Liberal Party leader Justin Trudeau. Right now, they only hold 46% of seats, which means that they would either need the support of the Bloc Québécois or the NDP to get anything passed. And in the past, both the Bloc Québécois and the NDP have been able to leverage their minority standing in Parliament to influence legislation that would benefit their base. Over the past several decades, the Bloc Québécois has successfully fought for the return of the Quebec Skills Training Program, stood up for farmers when the Quebec agriculture model was threatened by international trade negotiations, and helped increase funding for Quebec's provincial government. Similarly, when the Conservative Party formed a minority government after the 2006 elections, the NDP was able to pressure Conservatives to include key provisions to the Clean Air Act after the initial versions was criticized for not doing enough to slow climate change. That influence on legislation is huge, and to me, it's a sign of healthy political behavior. This bargaining with the opposition party, or maybe you can call it threatening, but this negotiation that they get into to enact policies that your base cares about is how politics is supposed to work. I know I speak in the theoretical right now in this Canadian example, and there are subtle differences such as election laws, campaign finance laws, and a little something that we'd like to call the Senate that makes this a little bit more difficult to achieve in the US. But I truly feel that this is something that we can realistically do here if we start treating third parties as more than just an afterthought during a presidential election cycle. And to a certain degree, and this is something that I've covered in a previous video, we are seeing a third-party movement here today with the rise of groups like the Justice Democrats and this new wave of progressive challengers that are unseating long-time entrenched Democratic incumbents. AOC earlier this year even said that in any other country, Joe Biden and I would not be in the same party. So let's not be in the same party. And based on my current assessment, in November, there will be at least 10 Justice Democrats or Justice Democrat endorsed representatives in the House. So if these representatives can band together and stay true to their campaign platform and push policies that the people want, they can start influencing legislation. Oh, you want a corporate tax cut? Well, you're not going to get that unless you give us Medicare for all. By gaining leverage in this way, the movement can and will become big enough and just annoying enough to turn ideas like Medicare for all or UBI into actual policies. I'll stop here for today, but hopefully this got your mind going about how third parties can have more influence in American politics. Thank you so much for watching, and don't let anybody vote shame you into voting for policies that you don't care about or not voting for policies that you do care about. I know I won't. Hey y'all, please take a moment to hit that like button and share this video with your friends if you enjoyed it. Also, please subscribe if you haven't already done so we can take back our media. I'd really appreciate it. My name is James Lee. I'll be back next week with more. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, thank you for your time.